up, guys? It's Sam Shah here, Wall Street Mastermind. I'm back here today with another client interview for you guys. Today I'm speaking with Luke, who just finished his recruiting process, had a very, very successful outcome, which I'll let him share with you guys in a bit. But definitely want to get him on here and talk about his experience, especially, coming from a non-target school and getting to where he is today. Just super happy and excited for him. And I know a lot of you could probably benefit as well from, just hearing about how he was able to do that. So, Luke, I want to thank you for taking the time to jump on here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to start off, maybe if you can just give our listeners a little bit of background about yourself, like help them understand kind of your profile a little bit. What type of candidate would you say you were going into recruiting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently a sophomore at Santa Clara University studying finance. If I think about when I started, trying to recruit for banking was the fall of my sophomore year. And at that point, I had very little experience in finance or business in general. Never really did much in high school with that or, over the summer of my freshman year. And so, coming in, sophomore year, I knew I had to get some experience within finance to really have a shot coming from Santa Clara. And so I got lucky and found some opportunities nearby school and was able to do like a research orientated internship, which, wasn't really super applicable to banking, but also, was good exposure. Definitely something, solid to have on my resume. But besides that, in terms of like a GPA, I was above a 3.7, but not close to a 4.0. And again, coming from a school like Santa Clara, that put me behind, some of my peers at that school that were also trying to recruit from banking.
Yeah.
And so I definitely needed to find an edge, within the process. And yeah, I guess if I think about, the things that really evolved for me throughout all this, is my behaviorals, my technicals. Like I remember around November, I had an interview for a boutique firm for the summer after my sophomore year.
Hmm.
And I remember they were asking me just like super basic technical questions that, I had no idea how to answer. Like I couldn't even explain what like enterprise value was. And I was
Hmm.
just like, I got to do something here in order to, give myself a chance.
Yeah. In hindsight, sitting where you are now, they feel super basic, but at the time, they didn't seem basic, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Um, got it. So, I mean, coming from a school like Santa Clara, obviously out here on the West Coast, most of the schools that actually um, get recruited from are like Stanford and Berkeley and UCLA and maybe USC, right?
Mhm.
Um, are there a lot of students from your school that break into banking each year? And like, do you know roughly how many or just ballpark maybe?
Yeah. So if I think about the class ahead of me, there's about two that broke in. One's going to a bulge bracket, the other one's going to a mid market. And then, the class ahead of that one, there's about two again. So,
Wow.
it's not the most popular path to take for my school for sure.
Right. And how big are your class sizes at Santa Clara, roughly?
Yeah. So I have about 1,200 kids in my grade.
Okay. So 2 out of 1,200 people each year get into investment banking. So definitely the odds are, I would say, are pretty much stacked against you then going to a non-target school like that.
Yeah.
Um, just because the banks don't recruit from there, but also like you don't have a lot of people around you that are trying to do the same thing. And so you're just not in that type of environment versus say a kid who's going to Haas at Berkeley or going to, I don't know, Wharton or, one of these
Mhm.
schools where everybody's trying to do banking. You can kind of bounce ideas off each other and see what everyone else is doing and things like that. You didn't have anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, outside of that small group of people, like I mentioned, it's, I'm not really taking classes at this point that are teaching me anything about banking. Um, so it's definitely something you kind of have to do on your own.
Got it. Got it. So I mean, I think you started working with us back in like December. So it's
Mhm.
been, about 5 months. We're in May right now, but prior to that, so that was December. So that was like halfway through your sophomore year, right?
Mhm.
So prior to that, what were some of the things that you had already done on your own, like in terms of whether it's on the networking side or on the interview preparation side? Like, what were some of the things you were doing?
Yeah, so in terms of networking, I probably had spoken to um, a handful of people at that point. Like I was definitely reaching out to a lot of bankers, but again, I wasn't really getting a whole lot out of those conversations. Like it would be more casual, like maybe there are people I had met before, like at school, like the older kids I mentioned. I wasn't really being referred on to other bankers or really expanding my network very efficiently. So by the time I actually started talking to you, Sam, I was like, I had exhausted what I thought my network was, which at that point, I don't know exactly how many people, but it couldn't have been more than 30 bankers. And like looking back on that, it's just, crazy to think that's, the extent I thought I needed to go to. In terms of my technicals, I was, focusing on, the guides that everybody uses, trying to memorize, words off of PDF, and wasn't really having the best time comprehending the material very well.
Yeah.
Because they're just so thick. It's hundreds of pages of just PDF. That's, for me, it's, easier to learn after like, being taught it by somebody instead of
Right.
just like memorizing a textbook, basically.
Right. Got it. Okay. So you networked with about 30 people. You're hopping on the phone with them, cold calling, whether it's alumni or people from, I believe that you had networked with people that were from your hometown area, right?
Hmm.
You're from the Midwest, right?
Hmm.
Um, but you weren't really getting referrals, like you said. Did you get any, interviews that were maybe like with small banks or just relevant internships that you were trying to get on your own? Like, did you have anything like that?
Yeah, so I had one, or I had a couple for the summer after my sophomore year that were held in the fall. And those are kind of, I guess, found by just reaching out to people, like the cold emailing thing. Like they actually would post stuff on our school's like handshake account, but you have to reach out to them to really have a shot. And you know again, I feel like from a technical perspective I wasn't prepared. And then just thinking back on some of my behavioral responses too were just you know so just not solid at all, just really not
Mhm.
good. And totally understand why I didn't get those offers looking back.
Got it. Okay. So, bottom line though is when you came to us, you had tried a lot of this stuff on your own already. Like you kind of knew at a high level, hey, these are the things I need to do. I need to go out and talk to bankers, especially coming from a non-target school. I need to make sure, I learn the technicals and read the guides and kind of doing all the things that are, I guess, conventional wisdom, right? And then wasn't really working out for you. How did you come across Wall Street Mastermind and like what kind of piqued your interest?
Yeah, so I think I found Wall Street Mastermind on LinkedIn. It was I think I came across your profile when I was looking for bankers to email. And I watched the introductory video and really just learned a little bit more about your strategy, your background in particular, having the experiences that you had. And became very interested in seeking out some expert advice, because at this point I knew it was something that I really wanted to do. And I
Mm.
was willing to do almost anything it took to put myself in a position to succeed here. And so that's where I saw a lot of value and wanted to kind of up my game and really give myself an extra edge.
Got it. And at the time, like what were you hoping for? Like in terms of the outcome? Like, based on where you were at the time, coming from the school you're coming from and how you were feeling about your networking and interview preparation efforts and things like that, like what would have been, like at the start of Wall Street Mastermind, if I asked you, um, what would be an outcome that you'd be happy with by the end of this program? Like, what would you have said?
Yeah, so it's funny at that point, where I'm from originally, there's a mid-market bank that's headquartered in my hometown, which might be a bit of a giveaway. But um, you know, at that point,
I
I
know which one you're
was
talking about, but maybe some people won't.
yeah. So that was like my my goal at that point was just be like, I'll be really excited if I can have an opportunity to go back home and work for this mid-market bank with maybe some of my friends that go to the local college where I'm from.
Mm,
But like I guess deep down I always knew I wanted more than that, but like just the expectations I had given my background and going to a non-target school, I was not trying to give myself too high of hopes.
yeah. Yeah. I remember, I think I did ask you kind of like the question that I just asked was just like, hey, what type of bank are you aiming for? And I think at the time you said bulge bracket really boutique, but then you caveated with, just being completely honest coming from Santa Clara, like my chances of breaking into a Goldman or a JP Morgan or a Morgan Stanley isn't super likely. I think you kind
Mhm.
of hedged what you said at the time and was like, well, I don't know about that, right?
Right.
I think it's definitely possible, but it's funny because I think like I bring that up because I feel like there's so many. This is something that a lot of the non-target school kids need to hear, which is as a non-target student, you guys are so conditioned to believe that because you go to a non-target school that you don't really have a shot at these top tier banks, right? Like you go on Wall Street Oasis or whatever, everybody will have you believe that, oh, you go to a non-target school, yeah, you're screwed, man. Like forget about it or whatever, right? Like
Right.
unless you go to Harvard or Wharton or Columbia, you can like basically never ever work at one of these elite banks, which I understand why people online tend to say stuff like that because that they're not, I don't think they're intentionally being malicious, but that is literally their perspective of the world, right? Like that's like everyone around them that they know that actually went to these banks are mostly from those schools, right? And so they're
Right.
just telling you their version of the truth. The funny thing is, and you know this now that you've been in the program, and you see how many other non-target school kids are in this program, and then you see that they're actually going to a lot of these top banks as well.
Mhm.
And so we have a different version of like worldview, right? Where we believe that non-target school kids can be just as competitive as a target school kids. Sure, you have to work a little bit harder. Not gonna lie about that, right? But you can absolutely get to an elite bank if you know what you're doing. And then also like a big part of it is that belief, right? Because if if like the entire time you've been told by people that you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you start to kind of believe it yourself and then it becomes self-fulfilling in a sense, right?
Right.
But like if you're all of a sudden in an environment where all the other non-target school kids are getting these outcomes, then you start to think like, well, why not me? Right? Because other
Mhm.
people are doing it. And like
Right.
having the right mindset and the right belief is like half the battle, right? Because otherwise you walk into that interview and you're already defeated because you're going in with a defeatist attitude of like, well, look at everyone else at this interview. They're all from Stanford and Berkeley and whatever. Like they're more qualified than I am. That's
Mhm.
I see non-target school kids with that mindset all the time, and it's like, well, yeah, no wonder why you're not getting the offer, right?
Right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely like you said, definitely a common, mindset that, I mean personally I even had it at, kind of like I just mentioned at a certain point. But I guess talking more specifically about the program and the other kids in it, a big thing for me was, just what you said, like seeing these other kids from these schools I hadn't even really like been that exposed to. Maybe they're on the East Coast or ones I weren't necessarily aware of, and them being just super successful with this whole recruiting process and absolutely killing it. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that these kids can in fact get it done and get these job offers. And sure, there's a couple kids from Santa Clara that were getting great offers at bulge brackets and really doing well, but in my eyes those guys were almost like superhuman in a sense. Like you see these people like on campus and stuff, and it's like you know that's like one in a million. But
Yeah.
after joining the program, you kind of realize that there's certain things you can do to put yourself in that group of people as well.
Yeah. You're now gonna be that guy on campus that all the underclassmen come and bother about. How did you get into investment banking, right?
Yeah.
um, so then you join Wall Street Mastermind, obviously. Um, what were some of the things that we worked on together, and like, what did you find to be most beneficial for you personally, or like, because people always ask, like, okay, I mean, I know I need a network. I know I need to learn the technicals. Yeah, sure. I know I have some stories prepared for my behaviorals. Everything I need is already out there online. So what's the difference? Like, what are you guys actually doing that's so different? So I
Yeah.
mean,
So
what did you find to be, or what changed in terms of the way you approach your preparation before and after?
mhm. So I'd say it'd be a couple things. First of all, having your expert, advice basically in my pocket 24/7, being able to hop on and message you questions, even just like really little things that would pop up in like my day-to-day networking attempts. Like maybe the banker forgot the call or he got tied up in something, and kind of approaching that situation and in a way that would allow for the next call to actually happen and for him to be a little bit more open and be like, okay, wow, this kid really wants it because he said this, he understands, kind of thing. In addition to that, definitely the technical part, like I said, that was something that I was spending just an absurd amount of time on and really just kind of spinning my wheels. And I'd like to think of myself as I guess a smart kid. Like I feel like I can comprehend it, but just really having the those videos and the again your expertise to be able to answer any questions I have. The mock interviews that you had on those modules was super helpful. Seeing how to like properly answer the questions fully. Um, then definitely the behaviorals, making sure that my behavioral responses were bulletproof, concrete. My story, all of that, making sure that I was able to defend everything I was saying and really be able to um, be in a position to be confident in my interviews. And I guess for like you and me, more like between what you and I did, like the mock interviews that we did leading up to my first round of my super day was super helpful as well. Really kind of exposing the areas I needed to work on and allowed me really to build out a really comprehensive preparation for these interviews. And every single time, like after I'd have my mock interview with you, Sam, like we would talk about something that I should improve, and then like the next day in my interview or whatever, a couple of days later, the exact same thing would show up, and I'd be like, all right, perfect, here we go, I'm super confident in this answer, I know this is like the best way I can answer it. So those
Right.
would definitely be the things that were absolute game changers for me.
Yeah. Um, that's actually a really interesting point. I'm curious, aside from the mock interviews you did with me, did you do mock interviews with anyone else? Like, did you do mock interviews with, upperclassmen, like, the small circle of people you said, for example, at your school that have already gone through the process, for example? Like, did you mock interview with other people as well?
Yeah, I did, and those were helpful too. But I guess in the experience I had, this upperclassman just had a limit to. He'd gone through one process. You know what I mean? Like he was, very successfully got his, an offer early on, and he was, done. But he didn't really go through, 10 different interview processes, or he hasn't been able to. I guess comparing to where you're at from your experience, like be able to look at thousands of different candidates and really determine what is better than the other. Like he was just kind of guiding me based on what worked for him, but
Mhm.
obviously everybody's different, and that's not necessarily the most effective way of doing it.
Yeah. So would you say, like, I'm sure your upperclassmen friends gave you some feedback as well, right? When you did the mocks
Hmm.
with them. And then obviously I gave you feedback as well when we did the mocks. Is there any difference in terms of the feedback that you receive, or the, like, whether it's, I mean, just in any way, shape, or form? Because I'm trying to help people understand, like, a lot of the times, people are like, well, yeah, I can practice with my upperclassman friend. What's the difference between that and what I would be doing with you guys, right? Is
Mhm.
there a difference or is there not a difference?
Yeah, so I'd say there's, at least for me, there's definitely a difference. I'm great friends with this upperclassman, so I appreciate all the help he's been able to offer me, absolutely. But just given the fact that his experience was so much more limited than the resources you can offer. So
Yeah.
even in terms of like the technical things, like he was guiding us through certain technical aspects of his interview process that, at least in my personal experience with, the opportunities I had like would not have been able to necessarily allow me to succeed if I just knew those things.
Mm,
So that's where like having your comprehensive preparation really helped me. And then I guess thinking about the behaviorals too, um, his were obviously they're helpful, like he was successful, but again just building out really solid answers was something that I needed help with, like
yeah.
absolute like bulletproof responses.
Yeah. I think like, one thing that I really take pride on is when we do mock interviews for our clients, we try to go really, really deep, right? Like our goal
Hmm.
is to always go as deep as possible.
Yeah.
And so it's not just giving you some very high level, superficial feedback like, oh, this needs to be a little bit more concise, or oh, this needs to be, a little bit more detailed. Like that's kind of directionally helpful maybe, but not super actionable, right? Versus
Right. Hmm.
I think like what we try to do is leverage our experience from having interviewed so many students before already, and also like having done interviews back when I was in banking and also in private equity as the interviewer, and knowing like, hey, based on your profile, if an interviewer is looking at your specific resume, what are the questions that they're likely to ask you, right? So going back to your point
Yeah.
earlier about stuff that we talk about the day before the interview is exactly what showed up in the interview. That comes from experience. That doesn't come from luck, right? And
Hmm.
I mean, to be honest, like most people, if they had the ability to predict what was going to show up in the interview, um, they would probably do pretty well, right? Because then
Yeah.
it becomes easy to prepare, right?
Yeah.
I think where most people struggle a lot with interviews is they're so overwhelmed because there's an infinite number of topics or questions that they could possibly ask you, and when you don't really know and you're kind of trying to guess at it, now you feel like you don't know where to focus on, and you're trying to prepare for everything all at the same
Mhm.
time, and there's only a limited amount of time, right?
Right. Absolutely. And that's like, I'm just thinking of a specific example in our experience. Like, there's certain things on my resume that'd be like really specific to the experiences I had. And, you know, my upperclassmen at school, like, like I said, they're great, but like they don't have like years of experience in banking. So like if they ask me to explain like, something I did in my internship, it's, the depth of their probing, it wasn't necessarily at the same level as maybe what I got in my actual interviews, just because, those are people that have been in the industry for numerous years, kind of like you. So I remember specifically with one of my internships, you just absolutely grilled me on one part of my resume that like I thought I had down, but I just really was like, wow, I got to like build out a much deeper and comprehensive response to that.
Yeah. And then so you went back and did that like that very same day, basically.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. And then
you,
it showed up the next day in my interview. Yeah. Just like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, man. I mean, when it comes to like grilling you about experiences on your resume and stuff, the level of detail that a real investment banker is going to go to is much greater than what like another college student is going to ask you, right? Just because
Mhm.
they don't really the upperclassmen, they're maybe like half a step ahead of you, and they don't really know that much more than you, so it's not like they can really challenge all the things that you're saying, right? Versus a banker, if you say something that doesn't really make sense, they're going to catch you, right? And
Right.
so you have to be 100% prepared going to those interviews. Absolutely. So sounds like on the interview side of things, you saw a huge improvement in terms of networking and lining up the actual interviews. how did you do in that area? Like, what was the stuff that we kind of showed you helpful, or did it change anything for you? And like, how successful were you in terms of getting interviews with the types of places that you were hoping to get interviews with?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it was absolutely game changing. Like I said, prior to, working with you, Sam, I thought I had exhausted my network at, whatever it was, like 30 bankers. But, honestly, I wish I had, um, I don't really know. I'd have to check my spreadsheet on exactly how many people I ended up getting in contact with, but it just grew exponentially after, implementing some of the strategies that you were helping me with, like the referral thing was I'm pretty sure every single conversation I had, I got a referral from it, and which just like again is multiplying my network simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so when it was all said and done, if I think about the amount of interviews I had, I got an interview at every single bank that I had spoken to, and so I was in like multiple processes here when it's all said and done. But it was, I was definitely connecting with people well, and it was definitely helping me.
Wow, you said you got interviews at every single bank that you had spoken with. Like, as long as you had spoken to someone at that bank, you pretty much had an interview there.
Right. Yeah. Because it'd be the type of thing where maybe I'd cold email somebody there. I'd, use whatever the reach out that you were helping me with. And then again, it'd just be a referral to somebody else, which would turn to a referral to somebody else in a matter of, 2 weeks. I'd talk to 3 people in their office and they're like, all right, yeah, like, you're pretty much good at this point,
Yeah.
because they're all, I have enough, connections within the office.
Yep. And these are like the bulge bracket and elite boutique banks that you were basically gunning for, right? Just to confirm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So this is what we always tell everyone, which is, hey, if you can get referrals for these interviews, which is the whole purpose of networking, right? But
Right.
if you have a consistent and predictable way of generating these referral opportunities, then you can basically repeat the same playbook at every single bank that you're targeting until you have the referral for the interview. And then getting the interview, that basically is no longer a challenge, right? Like, that's
Hmm.
like, if you and if you have an interview at every single bank, literally you just have to decide which banks you want, right? If you have an interview at every single one of those banks, then all you need is one offer, right? Like,
Right.
you have multiple at bats, all you need is one offer. And as long as your technicals and your behaviorals are on point, you're going to get that offer, right?
Hmm.
It's like, honestly, when you break it down and think about it, it's so simple, right? There's not like rocket science, right? Like, sure, all the stuff that we're teaching you guys, um, you probably would have never figured it out on your own, right? But it's
Right.
like, once you figured it out and once we showed it to you, it's like, oh, like, anybody can do it, right?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
not like you have to be some special unicorn rock star student to be able to execute on the strategies that we're teaching, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So obviously, you pretty much been recruiting for the last 5 months straight. So
Mhm.
I'm sure you're happy to be done. So can we tell people where you ended up getting an offer from and what the outcome was of this whole journey, I guess?
Yeah. So, I guess about a week ago at this point, I got an offer from Evercore in Menlo Park, which I was really excited about. It was, my first choice coming into recruiting.
Yeah,
So, couldn't have been a better outcome for me.
yeah. And that's pretty amazing because I would say, first of all, it's one of the top elite boutiques out there, right? Like, you look at all the league tables, and Evercore is consistently up there with all the bulge
Mhm.
bracket banks in terms of deal volume and deal size and things like that. Um, but also, just even beyond that, like, because elite boutiques are smaller than bulge bracket firms in terms of headcount, typically, I would say, and I think most people will agree, they're even harder to get into than the bulge bracket firms. I'm not saying elite boutiques are better or bulge brackets are better. I think that's like everybody has their own personal preference and there's no right or wrong there. But objectively speaking, in terms of selectivity and in terms of the degree of difficulty when it comes to the interviews, and I don't know if you felt this because you had other interviews too, but like elite boutiques definitely go harder
Mhm.
with their interviews, and they ask you, more granular technical questions and things like that, right? And so
Mhm.
just being able to come from, Santa Clara and ending up at one of the top elite boutiques, I always say like um, that's an amazing accomplishment. And so, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm super proud of what you were able to accomplish, and obviously, super happy and excited for you. Um, and I honestly, I can't wait to see like how you do there. And I know like you and I guess like sorry, like I guess the last question I wanted to ask you is just if you have anyone, or sorry, if you come across anyone, or maybe people who are listening right now who are in a similar situation as you, right? Or maybe, you know, maybe they're going to a non-target school. Not a lot of kids from their school are going to banking, but they have, high aspirations, and this is something that they know they want to do. They just don't necessarily know how to get there, and they're struggling a little bit. Like, what is something that you wish you had known, back when you first started going through this process? Like maybe something now that you wish you knew back then, or you wish someone had told you a lot earlier, which would have made your life a lot easier. Is there anything like that? Do you have like just one piece of advice that you want to give people?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing for me would be, just be crazy efficient with your time. Like, you got to keep going after it every single day, day in and day out, to really give yourself a chance. The last thing you want to be doing is scrambling like the week before your interview to make sure you're covering all your bases. Like, you'd rather be ready 2 months before it starts than 2 days before it starts.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just say the time factor, and just being crazy efficient, and using your time the best you can to prepare for this would be my biggest advice.
Yeah. So basically having a sense of urgency
Hmm.
and starting as early as possible. Um, but also once you start, like basically being ruthlessly efficient about where you're allocating the 24 hours you have in a day towards, right? Because you have school and you have internships and extracurriculars and networking and interview prep and all this stuff that's on your plate, and you just kind of have to juggle all of that simultaneously. And that's probably honestly one of the biggest challenges when it comes to recruiting, right? It's not that any one thing in and of itself is really, really hard, but it's the sum total or the totality of everything you have to do simultaneously that makes it so that most people aren't able to check all these boxes simultaneously, right?
Right. Hmm.
Got it. Okay. That's great advice, man. So, for those of you that are listening, hopefully you guys take that to heart. And, again, like I said earlier already, I think, if you're in a similar situation as Luke, and maybe you go to a non-target school, or you're feeling like you have big goals, but you don't really know how to get there right now, or you think things are looking bleak, or you've had a lot of doubters online or in real life tell you, hey, like, forget about it. You should have more modest goals or whatever. Um, I would encourage you guys to reach out to us. Not saying that hey, every single person from a non-target school is going to be able to end up at a bulge bracket or elite boutique bank. I'm definitely not saying that, right? But what I am saying is, for the right person, if you have the right qualities, like you have the work ethic, you have the um, coachability where you're open to constructive feedback, and you have the commitment and dedication, and just perseverance to really even go through this process and take all the rejections along the way. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish, right? And like, we're here to help you with that, so if that's something that you feel like you're looking for, just like Luke was looking for back whatever, 5 6 months ago, I want to encourage you guys to schedule a call with our team. Usually, what we do is we'll do a free strategy session with you. First, completely free, no obligation whatsoever. Just for us to learn more about your situation and where you're at in the recruiting process, what it is that you feel like you're struggling with and what you need help with, and then based on that, if we feel like we're a good fit to help you, which is not always the case, but if we feel like we're a good fit to help you, we'll come up with a tailored game plan for you, right? And if not, then we'll tell you that, but we'll still give you advice on what we think you should do instead. Um, that's going to help you get the best outcome possible. So if you want to do that, you can schedule this call by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST. So it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And, we look forward to speaking with you and hopefully helping you get this, not the same, but similar outcome that we helped Luke with. So, Luke, again, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to jump on here today and share your experiences with everyone. I'm sure there are a lot of non-target school students out there that are going to find this to be hugely beneficial and inspirational, to be honest, just to like show them what is possible, right? And I, like I said earlier, look forward to seeing what you accomplish both next summer as a summer analyst, as well as beyond that. Right? I mean, this is really just the beginning, and there's so much more success ahead of you, and I can't wait to see what you're about to do.
Well, thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, just like I tell all the other alumni of the program, like definitely don't be a stranger and stay in touch. And let me know if I can ever help you with anything.
Sounds good.
All right, awesome. Guys, that'll be it today. It's a wrap. And we'll be back again with more of these in the very near future. All right. Thank you, guys.